The hallway smelled of old wood and lemon polish, and the particular warmth of a house heated and lived in continuously for 60 years. The smell of care, accumulated and specific, which Claire had been contributing to for 4 of those years. Claire Ashworth was 27 years old, standing in the second-floor hallway of the Ashworth family mansion in Asheville, North Carolina, at 4:17 on a Wednesday afternoon, holding a suitcase she had not finished packing. Preston had knocked on her bedroom door 11 minutes ago. She had not moved since he left. Eleanor Ashworth had died 9 days ago at 84. Preston arrived from Atlanta 3 days after the funeral with a manila folder and the expression of a man who has decided that information delivered calmly is not the same as cruelty. The will left the mansion to the estate, administered by Preston as executor. There was a provision for Claire, a cash bequest of $22,000, which Preston described as generous, given that she was not a blood Ashworth. He used that phrase with the careful neutrality of someone who has rehearsed it until it no longer sounds like what it is. 30 days to vacate. A buyer already interested. He was sorry for her loss. That was when Claire stopped listening. Eleanor was not Preston's loss in any way that resembled how she was Claire's. She had been standing in the hallway for 11 minutes, looking at Eleanor's dressing room door at the end of the hall. Eleanor had kept it locked for 4 years without explanation, and Claire had never asked, because Eleanor answered questions in their own time. 2 weeks before she died, she pressed a small brass key into Claire's hand and said, "When the time comes, you will know what to do with what you find. Trust the room." The key was on a chain around her neck, Eleanor's suggestion. So was the instruction that came with it. "Keep it close. Don't let anyone see it." Preston said 30 days. She had been in this house for 4 years and had never opened that door. She was going to open it tonight. Downstairs. Preston's voice rose in the front parlor. The performing tone he used when he wanted someone to believe he was busier than he was. Claire set the suitcase inside her bedroom door and walked down the hall. The key was warm from being against her skin for 2 weeks. Eleanor's dressing room smelled of cedar and the faint ghost of the same perfume she had worn for 60 years. A specific floral amber scent that Claire had associated since childhood with safety and competence, because Eleanor was always the person in any room who knew what to do next. The room was 12 feet by 10, lined on 3 walls with built-in cabinetry Eleanor had installed during a 1987 renovation. Floor-to-ceiling mahogany, beveled glass panels on the upper sections, solid doors below. It was the most beautiful furniture in the house, and Claire had always known it as exactly that, furniture. What she had not known was that the rightmost section of the lower cabinetry, the section that appeared to be a solid panel between 2 cabinet doors, was not a panel, it was a door. The brass key Eleanor had given her was not a key in the conventional sense. It was a measuring tool, a small brass instrument with a specific protrusion along its shaft. Claire discovered this by following the preparatory letter she found. Folded inside the false bottom of the center cabinet's 3rd drawer, which she found by following the single instruction Eleanor had whispered 2 weeks before she died. "Trust the room." The letter was short. It said, "The mechanism is in the 3rd drawer, center cabinet, beneath the false bottom. The fitting requires the tool to release. Pressure alone will not do it. Hold it for 3 seconds. Claire pulled the 3rd drawer, pressed at the bottom panel until it lifted, and found the recessed brass fitting beneath. She inserted the key tool. She applied pressure and held it. 3 seconds. The magnetic catch released with a sound like a single soft note. Small and specific and entirely deliberate, the sound of something Eleanor had apparently heard many times, and that Claire was hearing for the first time. The panel swung inward on silent hinges. The air that came through was climate-controlled, noticeably cooler and drier than the dressing room, and it smelled of old paper and cedar and something metallic and clean that Claire could not immediately name. At the bottom of the false bottom compartment, beneath the fitting, was a second folded note. 4 sentences. The room has been waiting since 1987. I built it during the renovation because I understood by then that the things worth protecting are best protected by not existing officially. Preston's father taught me that, though not intentionally. Go in, read everything, then decide. Claire stepped through the panel into the dark and found the light switch exactly where the note said it would be. The room smelled of cedar and old paper, and the metallic clean scent from the doorway, which she understood now, looking at the left wall, was the smell of paper stock certificates stored in archival sleeves, 14 feet by 12, larger than expected. Eleanor had claimed the space on the 1987 building permits as a structural support cavity, a description made technically accurate by the steel beam she had installed along the north wall, specifically for that purpose. She had not lied. She had engineered the truth into the correct shape. The walls were cedar-lined. The floor was quarter-sawn oak, the same as the rest of the 3rd floor, laid continuously through the doorway, so the seam was invisible from the dressing room side. The room was climate-controlled, fully lit, and it was not a storage space. Storage spaces have a quality of disuse. This room had the opposite. Along the left wall, a floor-to-ceiling shelving unit held archival boxes labeled in Eleanor's handwriting by year and category. The earliest dated 1963, the most recent 2019, 56 years of something, organized and maintained in a room that did not officially exist. Along the right wall, a glass-fronted cabinet held books. Claire could read spines from where she stood, enough to understand these were not decorative volumes. Specific books, chosen, signed, and kept behind glass for reasons that had nothing to do with decoration. At the far wall, a desk, a lamp, a sealed envelope with her name in Eleanor's handwriting, and beside it a leather portfolio stamped with an Asheville law firm's name and the year 2020. The desk chair's cushion was compressed into the shape of someone who had sat in it regularly, returning to the same position over many years. Eleanor had been here, recently, and before recently, and for decades before that, managing something no one in her family had known she was managing. Claire turned the sealed envelope over. On the back, in Eleanor's handwriting, read the portfolio first, then open this. The portfolio will tell you what you have. The letter will tell you what to do with it. Do not let Preston see either one until you have spoken to Thomas Reeves at the law firm. She opened the portfolio. Thomas Reeves had written by hand beneath the firm's letterhead. Your grandmother asked me to tell you she hopes the room is everything she intended it to be. The portfolio was 43 pages. Claire read it at Eleanor's desk, in Eleanor's chair under Eleanor's lamp, while Preston's voice moved through the floors below her in the clipped, performing register of a man conducting business he once witnessed. The portfolio documented 4 things: stock certificates. Eleanor had begun acquiring individual company shares in 1963, purchasing paper certificates directly, technology companies, pharmaceuticals, regional banking, never through a broker, always in paper form, always stored in the archival sleeves on the left wall shelving. The 2020 valuation, prepared by a licensed securities assessor through Thomas Reeves's firm, placed the collection's total value at $2.3 million. The certificates had been accumulating in a room that did not officially exist for 56 years, entirely invisible to every estate search, every financial review, every document Preston had produced with such confidence 3 hours ago. The book collection. Eleanor had spent 60 years acquiring signed first editions from authors she knew personally, at readings, at residencies, at the university, where she had audited literature courses for 30 years, without anyone in her family knowing she attended. The glass-fronted cabinet held 211 volumes. The 2020 appraisal placed the collection between $480,000 and $620,000. The archive, 56 years of private financial records, correspondence, and personal journals. The documentation establishing provenance and ownership for everything else in the room. The deed. In 2011, Eleanor had purchased a 2-bedroom cottage on 3 acres in Weaverville, 12 miles from the mansion, and filed the deed in Claire's name. She had paid the property taxes every year from a private account. A property management company had maintained the cottage, kept it clean, kept it ready, never rented it. The deed had been in Claire's name for 12 years. Claire had been the owner since she was 15 years old and had not known it. She opened Eleanor's letter last. It explained Preston's father. What he had done during his own mother's estate administration in the 1980s, what Eleanor had watched and understood and spent the following 30 years quietly preventing from happening again. It explained the cottage and the year Eleanor bought it and why that year specifically. You were 15. I watched you spend an afternoon reorganizing my kitchen because you noticed it bothered me. I knew then. It ended. I could not give you the mansion. That was never mine to give cleanly. But I could give you the ground to stand on. When someone tried to take it from you, I have been giving it to you for 12 years. You have always already had it. Eleanor. Claire was sitting with the letter open when she heard Preston's footsteps on the 3rd floor stairs. 45 seconds. She folded the letter into her jacket, picked up the portfolio, stepped back through the cabinet panel, and pulled it shut behind her. The magnetic catch engaged with the same soft note it had made when she opened it. She was standing in the dressing room with her hands at her sides when Preston opened the door. The portfolio was behind the panel. The letter was in her jacket. The key was on the chain around her neck, warm, invisible. Preston said he had been looking for her. He said the appraiser was coming Friday. He said the cabinetry was staying with the house. Claire said she understood. She said she would take care of it. She used Eleanor's voice when she said it. The voice that means something other than what it says. The Weaverville cottage smelled of cedar and clean air and the particular freshness of a house, kept ready without being lived in, maintained, aired, waiting. Eleanor had left a key under the 3rd stepping stone from the left, as specified in the property management notes inside the portfolio. Claire had driven there after Preston's light went dark because she needed to see it, and because some things require being stood in rather than read about. She sat in the kitchen and called Thomas Reeves at 7:14 Thursday morning. He picked up on the 2nd ring and said, "I have been expecting your call since March 2020. He confirmed the cottage deed first. Filed in Claire's name, Buncombe County Register of Deeds, February 2011. Taxes current through the present year. No encumbrances, no lines, entirely outside the Ashworth estate. Not in the will, not in the inventory, not within Preston's authority as executor in any capacity. Claire had owned it for 12 years without knowing it existed. Then he confirmed the stock certificates. Held in archival storage in the hidden room, appraised at $2.3 million in 2020, registered in Eleanor's name with Claire, named as sole beneficiary under a transfer on death designation. Eleanor had filed with the Securities Registration Service in 2019. Transfer on death designations pass assets directly to the named beneficiary at death, outside probate, outside the estate, outside any executor's jurisdiction. The certificates had transferred to Claire the moment Eleanor died. Preston's estate inventory did not include them because they had never been part of the estate. They were already Claire's and had been since the day Eleanor died. Then Thomas told her something the portfolio had not included. In their final meeting in 2022, Eleanor had asked him to file a notice of interest on the Ashworth Mansion property on Claire's behalf, citing her 4 years of continuous habitation and documented maintenance contribution. The notice was not a claim of ownership. It was a legal flag, a recorded instrument requiring resolution before clear title could transfer to any buyer. Preston's closing could not proceed without addressing it. Thomas had filed it the week Eleanor died. The appraiser was coming Friday morning. Thomas needed Claire in his office Friday afternoon with the portfolio and the transfer on death documentation. The notice of interest created a legal question Preston's buyer's title insurance company would not ignore, and that Preston's real estate attorney would need to answer formally before any closing date could hold. Claire drove back to the mansion at dawn. The old wood and lemon polish smell of it reached her at the front door, the way it had reached her every morning for 4 years. She went upstairs past Eleanor's dressing room and did not unpack the suitcase. She did not need to unpack it yet. Preston was sleeping 2 floors below in a house that was considerably more complicated than his paperwork suggested, and Friday was 1 day away. Thomas Reeves's office smelled of old books and wood smoke, and the settled authority of a practice that had handled significant estates for 31 years without theatre. He was 67, measured, with the unhurried manner of a man who has watched enough family disputes to know that the ones who arrive with printed documents and rehearsed reasonableness are rarely the ones who leave with everything they came for. Preston arrived with his real estate attorney, a younger man named Garrett, in a good suit, carrying the slightly pressured energy of someone who has promised a clean closing and is beginning to understand the promise may have been premature. Claire arrived with the portfolio Thomas presented first. The transfer on death designation for the stock certificate collection, $2.3 million in securities that had transferred to Claire at Eleanor's death, entirely outside the estate. The Weaverville cottage deed, filed in Claire's name in 2011, taxes current, no encumbrances. The notice of interest filed on the mansion property. Garrett read the transfer on death document. He read it twice. He leaned toward Preston and spoke quietly. Preston's composure did not break. Preston's composure rarely broke. But something in the set of his jaw shifted in the way things shift when a person understands that the transaction they have been managing is not the transaction that was actually occurring. Garrett explained it without embellishment. The certificate collection had never been part of the estate. The transfer on death designation had removed it from probate jurisdiction at the moment of filing in 2019. The notice of interest created a title encumbrance requiring resolution before the buyer's title insurance would issue. Resolving the notice required either a negotiated settlement with Claire or formal legal proceedings, whose timeline was incompatible with the buyer's closing schedule. Preston looked at Claire. He said, "There was a room, wasn't there?" It was not quite a question. Claire looked back at him across Thomas Reeves's conference table with the expression Eleanor had used for situations that did not require a response beyond presence. She said, "Eleanor built it in 1987. She said you would come eventually." She wanted to be ready. Preston was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She left you more than she left me." Claire thought of the cottage in Weaverville, its cedar smell, its kept-ready kitchen, its deed filed in her name when she was 15 years old by a woman who had already decided what kind of person she was going to be. She said, "She left me what she thought I would take care of." The notice of interest was resolved by negotiated settlement 3 weeks later. Claire received a formal acknowledgement of her maintenance contribution, a cash settlement of $114,000, and the right of first refusal if Preston sold the mansion within 5 years. Preston's buyer closed 61 days after the original schedule. Before Claire left, Thomas told her Eleanor's final instruction that the hidden room, once Claire had taken what she needed, should be disclosed to the mansion's next owner as a historical feature, with a written record of Eleanor's construction and use of the space. Eleanor had wanted the room known eventually. She had simply wanted Claire to know it first. Preston Ashworth sold the mansion 2 months after the original closing date, at a price reduced by the settlement payment and the 60-day carrying cost of the delay. He did not pursue further legal action. The notice of interest was discharged per the settlement terms. The right of first refusal went unused. Claire did not want the mansion. She wanted what Eleanor had actually built for her, which was something else entirely. The stock certificate collection was transferred to a licensed securities firm and liquidated over 14 months at a total return of $2.4 million, reflecting market appreciation since the 2020 appraisal. The book collection was donated to the university, where Eleanor had audited literature courses for 30 years without her family's knowledge, with a named collection established in her honor, the Eleanor Margaret Ashworth collection of signed first editions. The charitable deduction Thomas Reeves's firm filed was applied across 3 years. The Weaverville cottage is where Claire lives now. She has expanded the restoration studio from the 2nd bedroom into the outbuilding on the back acre and taken on 2 apprentices. The cottage smells of linseed oil and old wood and the particular settled quality of a house being lived in properly for the first time after 12 years of being kept ready. It has the smell of a place that has finally become what it was always intended to be. Eleanor's chair is in the front room. Claire did not take it from the hidden room. She found it in Eleanor's private storage unit at the property management company. Eleanor had purchased a second one, identical, specifically for the cottage, because she had always intended Claire to have somewhere to sit when she arrived. She had thought of that too. She had thought of everything. Eleanor Ashworth spent 37 years managing a private life inside the walls of a house that everyone around her thought they understood completely. She built a room to run it from and a cottage to retire to, and put both of them in the name of the person she trusted most. 12 years before that person knew she needed them. She did not announce any of it. She simply made it ready.